Welcome to Plug Making 101. Some people had asked me to describe the whole process, so here goes. First of all, a plug is basically a positive representation of a part that you want to create. In this case, we're looking at the lower half of the fuselage of the Raptor aircraft. And it's basically a big block of foam covered with some fiberglass, covered with some putty, and then primered. And so here, these are also plugs, and these ones allow us to create conduits that run across the floor on the inside of the fuselage. This is also a plug here, and this is the forward bulkhead that goes inside the fuselage where you rest your feet up against. And this is a rear bulkhead that will be back behind the rear seats. So how do we go about creating one of these? First of all, we take some 2x2 steel or 2x4 steel and we create a frame. Some frames are small, some are large, depending on the sort of part that we're creating. And in this video, I'll be mixing up different examples of what we're doing, so it's not always the same one that we're working on here. So the next thing we do is we take a big block of foam, and we have these that are 8 foot long and about 4 foot by 3 foot, and we cut off a piece using a hot wire. Then we take that piece and we glue it to our platform, and we put some weight on it until the glue dries. Once that's dry, we put it up on the mill and we do what's called a roughing cut. And so here, this is the rear half of the fuselage, and we're just running down through layers and cutting off most of the stuff that we don't need. Once the roughing cut is done, we actually do a finishing cut. And here you can see half of the roughing cut's done over here, and it's just working on the other side. So when we're actually cutting the foam, we cut off 3/16 of an inch more than what we actually are going to have on the finished part. So here you can see we're doing the finishing cut, and the shape is basically there. But like I said, we cut off 3/16 of an inch more than what we are going to end up with to allow us room to put the glass and the putty on there. So once that's the finish mill's done, we put some fiberglass on there, a couple of layers, and then we soak it in with resin and make sure it's all bonding nicely to the foam, and that gives us a nice hard shell on it, something that we can spray the putty onto, because the putty will melt the foam if we don't have a protective coat. So here's the fuselage again, and this has the fiberglass on it, and you can see it sort of has a bit of a sheen to it now. It has 2 layers on there. And so we've built up a little bit from the 3/16 over that we cut it. We've built up maybe a 1/16 of an inch there. We then sand that plug just so it has a rough finish, and then we can spray the putty on it. And here we actually put 4 coats of putty on there, and that builds up a much thicker layer on there. So at this point, we're actually larger than the part is going to be. Next, we put it back through the mill again, and we cut off about a 1/16 of an inch, and that brings it to the size that it actually is. And it gives us a fairly smooth finish. And lastly, we do some more sanding on there just to give it a nice smooth finish and fix up any imperfections from the mill. And then it's ready for primer. And we spray a coat of primer on there, and then that will get a sanding, and then it'll get a top coat put on there and get polished, and we'll be ready to pull a mold off, and you'll see that in a future video. So there's our finished product again, ready for a top coat, and ultimately be able to pull a mold off of that. And finally, this is what it looks like when your $10,000 software from Mechsoft called Visual Mill decides it wants to do a 360 in your work and mess everything up.